Hello and welcome along. So today we're going to talk about the origins of Janus, the first Supreme Grandmaster of the Grey Knights, and how they came into existence. So when we talk about Janus, we have to start with Magnus. Now, quite famously, Magnus the Red was responsible for breaching the webway and ruining the Emperor's webway project when he tried to warn the Emperor about the beginnings of the Horus heresy. So in doing so, he not only did he greatly damage the Emperor's equipment in the throne room where he was trying to build this webway control system, he also managed to essentially damage himself. He used so much psychic energy to break through the barriers that were protecting the webway project from any potential chaos incursion, that he shattered himself. So, well, we don't entirely know why this would happen. If it was because it was just such an incredible effort to do what he did, or because the wards that were involved, kind of shattered, kind of damaged him in some way. That as he breached them, it also injured him. Or it could be more like the psychic backlash from realizing that he was wrong and that he'd been tricked, and that he damaged this project of the Emperor, and that he was being used by some other force, some unknown. But he doesn't know at this point about Zinch exactly, but he has been tricked. So it could all be a combination of all of this coming together. But essentially, that moment in doing this has basically shattered him. And again, he doesn't actually know that this has happened to him. He feels like massive regret, and he's distraught about what's happened, but he doesn't know that he's been broken into these shards as such. And now, so when this happens, his sort of psychic being is drawn back to Prospero and to his real body, or his kind of his physical body that's on Prospero still, but it leaves behind parts of him on Terra. And in fact, what happens is several shards of Magnus are sort of spread around space and time over a period of time as well. It doesn't all happen in one go. But at this point, at least one shard is left on Terra. And this shard is basically the part of his personality that represents the loyalty to the Emperor. So because this shard of Magnus is left on Terra, Malcador basically acquires it and is able to take control of the shard for a plan that he slowly developed to create a new version of Magnus, essentially, by merging this shard of Magnus with a thousand sun and a version of Magnus that he can put on the golden throne, so the Emperor won't have to sit on it. Let's go back to Prospero, where we can now talk about who this person will be. After the Battle of Prospero, some of the Thousand Sons that were sent away before the battle start to return, and they want to find out what's going on. They don't really know what's happened. They've lost contact with the Legion and Magnus, and so a small unit of them decide to go back, and they come across Prospero, and obviously it's a devastated world. It's basically ash on the surface. All the buildings have been smashed. Almost all life is destroyed. So they decide to go down to the planet's surface to see if they can find any clues of what's happened. And a small force of them, I think it's less than a squad, led by a captain, go down, and they find that there's some other Astartes there, and these turn out to be world eaters led by Khan. And after some skirmishing, the world eaters managed to capture the captain of these Thousand Sons, and they take him away, lock him up, and they put basically like psychic restraints on to stop him using his powers. And Khan tries to, he's torturing him for information, but he's not really. He's kind of in a battle of his own. Of just really what he wants is the Thousand Sons to help him and to remove the Butcher's Nails, which they can do, although they wouldn't be able to do it for Angron, because his Butcher's Nails are a very specific, unique piece of technology. But the Butcher's Nails that are put into the Astartes of the World Eaters is actually a less unique technology. It's an imitation of the Butcher's Nails, the real Butcher's Nails that are in Angron. And so, although it seems impossible to take out these real Butcher's Nails from Angron, it is possible for someone who is incredibly skillful and powerful psyker in Thousand Sons to do this. Khan is kind of feels he's basically fighting this in a battle of whether he should allow this to happen, to be cured of the butcher's nails and actually get himself back, or to just give in to the nails. And in the end, he gives in to the nails and kills his Thousand Sons captain. So, and at this point, the remaining part of the Thousand Sons squad that's on the planet are either killed or they escape. And one of those people that escapes is Ravul Arvida. So Arvida is a sergeant of the Thousand Sons and a member of the Corvidae cult. Now, the Corvidae cult are specialists in essentially seeing the future. So he uses his abilities to evade capture for long enough that the World Eaters decide to leave the planet. And so he's left on the planet on his own, basically. And now he remains there for some time until the White Scars turn up. Now, so we go back a little bit here. Why are the White Scars there? Well, basically, White Scars have been out on the fringes of Imperial space, and they don't really know what's happening with the heresy, and they start to get reports of what's going on, and they get mixed reports, and they don't really know what side to pick. Well, at least so the Khan doesn't know what side he's going to come down on, and he's very close to Horus, so he thinks that Horus must have a reason for why he's doing this, and he doesn't. The Khan is probably one of the Primarchs with the most doubt in the Emperor. So he's not 100% convinced that the Emperor is right. So he actually has quite a lot of doubts about the methods that the Emperor uses in the Great Crusade and so on. So he's open to following Horus. But he wants to find out what's really going on. So he decides, well, the best person to ask is Magnus, because he's always looked up to Magnus. He's close friends with Magnus. And he's thinking, well, if anyone can help me make this decision, it's Magnus. So I need to find him and see what's going on. So he's gone to Prospero to find out, what the truth of the heresy is. And at first sight, he sees that Prospero is being destroyed, and this confirms some reports they've been getting that the Space Wolves had attacked Prospero on the orders of the Emperor, and so this is getting him. He's thinking, well, actually, it looks like Horus is right. So he decides to go down to the surface to see if he can find anything, any clues or anything, and he goes down with his bodyguard. He gets separated from them, falls into a crevice, and eventually comes across a shard of Magnus. So he doesn't understand what that actually is at this point, but he has a conversation with this shard of Magnus, thinking he's talking to the actual full Magnus, but knowing something's not right. And from this discussion, he realizes that there's something wrong with the traitors, essentially, and that he shouldn't join Horus. At least it's kind of pushed him back the other way towards not supporting Horus. And he realizes that there's something wrong with Magnus and that something's happened here. And so he then gets reunited with his bodyguard eventually. Now, the bodyguard have come under attack by these kind of insectoid psychic creatures. They're called something like psychnuians, who breed by implanting their eggs psychically into the brains of psychers. And they've started to attack his bodyguard. And Arvida, who's still on the planet, comes across this scene and intervenes. So he's a powerful psyker, so he's able to drive off these psychnuians and kill them, kill some, drive off the others. This kind of immediately endears him to the White Scars who are on the planet, and so they don't immediately see him as an enemy. They're a little bit standoffish at this point, but they are starting to accept him as an ally, at least in this moment. And now, shortly after this, he helps them find the Khan. They're reunited, but then Mortarion turns up. So Mortarion has been sent by Horus to try and persuade the White Scars to come over to join him. Not the best choice, because Mortarion has this kind of, well, let's be honest, he's a terrible diplomat, and he just makes the Khan's mind up for him. Really, once he meets Mortarion, he talks to him for a bit. It's really makes his mind up. Okay, these traitors are clearly not the people I want to be associating with. And this, combined with the discussion he's had with the Shard of Magnus, makes him decide no, he's going to stay loyal to the Emperor. And they then fight for a brief while, and Arvida helps them in this fight against the Death Shroud. And then he also then allows the White Scar's fleet in orbit to locate them. So the atmosphere of Prospero has made it practically impossible to locate the Khan and his bodyguard, so they can't be teleported back up to the fleet, which the fleet really need right now, because the fleet, having seen the Death Guard ship appear, have just turned on each other. So the loyalist elements and the traitor elements within the fleet have turned on each other, and this is roughly 50-50, and they're kind of fighting each other to the death. This is because both sides believe that the Khan will pick their side. So they aren't disloyal to the Khan. But half of them have believed that Horus is right and they need to join him, and that the Khan will definitely join him, and because that's the obvious decision to make. And the other half believe that they should remain loyal to the Emperor, and that the Khan will obviously remain loyal to the Emperor because that's obviously right. So they're fighting each other out, this argument out in amongst themselves, while the Khan is down on the planet. And both sides feel that they have to act now because all the other side will take control. And nothing's going to stop this unless the Khan himself intervenes. And he can't, because the fleet can't locate him. So Arvida allows the fleet to locate him using a psychic beacon, essentially. And then, so the Khan is brought back up, teleported back up. He stops the fighting and decides and tells them that he's going to remain loyal to the Emperor, and that the ones that were trying to betray him, well, not him as such, but the ones that were going to turn to Horus were in the wrong, and he instigates a kind of a punishment system. Many of them are sent away on suicide missions. Some of the ones that are least knowing of what's happening are reincorporated into the Legion. The others are told, you have to make up for this by going out on these suicide missions, and he managed to kind of reconstitute the Legion as one whole at this point by doing this. And he then allows Arvida, because he's obviously proven himself to be useful and apparently loyal at this stage, to join them. And so then the White Scars spend about 4 years mounting a guerrilla warfare campaign against the traitors. And Arvida is with them all the way through this. So he is helping them. He's in fact, not just helping them, he's a major part of this. He saves them on many occasions. He saves individuals. He builds up a very big, close relationship with the equivalent to a chief librarian, which is just Yasugi within the White Scars. White Scars call their librarian Stormseers. So he's like the most powerful Stormseer. And but other senior officers as well. He comes very close with them, and they all respect him, and they admire him as well for his how he's remained loyal even though his legion hasn't, and also just how powerful he is as a psyker, and also and how effective he is as a warrior as he fights with them throughout this campaign. Now, eventually, the White Scars realize that they just can't keep doing this. Eventually, they're going to run out of numbers. They're just being whittled down. More and more traitor forces are being sent to fight them, and they just can't maintain this campaign. So they decide to make a run for Earth, for Terra. And the plan for this involves using a prototype version of the Golden Throne, which they've located. And it's basically the technology that the Golden Throne will be based upon. It's sort of an ancient Golden Age technology type piece of technology. And they managed to... There's quite a lot of story here. I mean, this whole campaign deserves its own video. But so for Arvida's part in this, he helps them with this process of getting hold of this technology and then using it to travel through the webway and back to Terra. So, and it's solely dependent on him to get them back to Terra. Once they're in the webway, he uses his massive psychic ability to hold the fleet together and guide them through the webway. Now, and he's doing this the whole time while fighting off the Flesh Change. Now, the Flesh Change is what happens to Thousand Suns if they overuse their powers. They get kind of a rampant mutant tendency, and eventually would turn them into a Chaos Spawn. And now he's starting to feel this happen quite early on during this period, but he manages to repress it all the way through this 4-year period, but he can't hold it back any longer. And during this voyage back to Earth through the webway, he kind of gives into it. He just loses control because it's just so much effort to keep the fleet together, and he goes unconscious essentially at the end. So they get back to Terra. He collapses, and he's gonna be consumed by the flesh change. But that's when an agent of Malcador steps in. So Malcador, the Sigalite, has been expecting him, as we said at the beginning of the video. So Malcador claims his body, essentially. I mean, he's alive still, so he claims him, takes him back to Terra, and tries to carry out this plan where he wants to merge this shard of Magnus with Arvida to become some form of new Magnus that he can control and put on the Golden Throne, and therefore allow the Emperor to be free from the Golden Throne. Now, during this process, it kind of fails essentially, and he's starting to. He looks like Arvida's going to be just killed. He'll die during the process, and it's not going to work. But the Khan intervenes, and the Khan doesn't. So the Khan didn't give permission for Malcador to take him, and he feels responsible for him. He's part of my legion now. So in fact, during the 4-year period that I was talking about before, they even offer Arvida a place within the legion, not just to be an ally, but to be an actual member of the legion as a White Scar. That's how much they value him and how much how close they feel to him. But he decides he kind of knows there's something in his future, in his fate that's going to happen, that he's got to do, and it doesn't involve becoming a White Scar. So he turns it down. But he's very tempted to take them up on his offer. Now, so the Khan intervenes, and he finds out what's going on to some extent, and basically tells Malcador to turn off the equipment and to let Arvida have his chance of survival on his own. Like what will happen will happen. Basically, it's like give him a chance. So he smashes all the equipment, the wards the psychic wards that are stopping this from happening. There's power fields and various equipment that's kind of containing the reactions, and they kind of step back and see what happens. And what happens is the psychic energy of Magnus consumes the body of Arvida that was rapidly mutating, and then reforms into a new physical body, and that is in the form of an Astarte. And that Astarte it's not Arvida anymore, but it's not Magnus. It's kind of a blending of these two entities into one being, and that being calls himself Janus, which is later written down as Janus. And so they become known as Janus. And Janus is the Roman god of duality and change. So it's kind of like the counter to Tzeentch, who is obviously the god of change in the 40k universe. So that's why Games Workshop chose the name. Whether that's why in universe they chose that, the being chose that name for itself, is another question. But anyway, so you've got this new being, Janus, and they're essentially, for all intents and purposes, a very powerful psychic Astarte, at least in appearance. And so he incorporates them into his followers, his kind of group known as the Knights Errant, who are basically the kind of the nucleus of what will become the Inquisition. This is all happening a bit before the end of the heresies. By the time we get to that point, Malcador has decided he's going to select 8 of his Astartes and send them to Titan, where he has set up everything that was needed to create this new legion, which will become the Grey Knights. And he sent recruits who are now in stasis. He's sent all the gene seed. He's sent all the weapons and equipment. He's built a fortress. And so the last step is basically he selects these 8 legionaries, these Astartes, one of which is Janus, and he sends them to Titan, drops them off there, and before he leaves, he makes Janus the leader, because Janus is obviously by far the most powerful, not just physically but obviously psychically as well, incredibly powerful, beyond anything that a normal Astarte could ever be. Whether he's as powerful as a Primarch is hard to say, but he is very, very powerful. And he's also very wise. He incorporates all of the kind of good aspects of Magnus's personality in that sense. He's not as powerful as Magnus, because he's only a section of Magnus's power, but he is kind of like he's almost like the anti-Magnus of so when Magnus, the evil part of Magnus, will eventually become a demon Primarch, this is represents the good part of Magnus becoming this new being. and he will of course lead the legion that has created the Grey Knights to fight chaos. So he will lead the fight against chaos. Which so it's in many ways Magnus isn't truly a traitor Primarch. It's kind of like Magnus is split in two at this moment when he reaches the throne room, and it's actually more than two, obviously. But the parts are rejoined back together into form one Magnus that will go on to become the Demon Primarch, and the other part that represents his loyal part will be fused with Arvida to become this other version of Magnus, and so they are kind of like mirrors of each other. So yeah, there you go. So that is the story of the creation of Janus and him becoming the first Grand Master of the Grey Knights. And I think it's a really interesting journey because it highlights so many different things that were going on during the heresy, and it shows you how important the White Scars were that in the early stages of the heresy and delaying the heresy. But it also shows you how important members of the Thousand Sons Legion are in various parts of the heresy. Like things that the White Scars would never have made it back to Terra, and would have never. Their campaign against Horus's forces would have been much less effective without Arvida, and the Legion probably would have destroyed itself at Prospero if it hadn't been for Arvida allowing the Khan to get back to his ship. Even then, after that, he helps them in various engagements, which if had he not been there, they would have lost. And then he is instrumental and key in getting them back to Terra. And if he hadn't got them back to Terra and they'd been destroyed before they got back to Terra, which they would have had they not escaped, the defenses of Terra would have been much weaker, and the siege of Terra probably would have gone in favour of the traitors. Well, it almost certainly would have, because they'd been missing an entire legion, although the White Scars weren't huge in number by then, but still very important addition to the defences. And of course, and then he goes on to actually help found the Grey Knights. So it's like this Arvida is incredibly important, and the creation of Janus is incredibly important all the way through, but probably from the start of his journey, not just the actual after he becomes Janus. It also tells you just how powerful Magnus is. The fact that there's almost effectively two Magnuses, and they're incredibly powerful, even split by that. And even another video I'd like to do is a video about the shards of Magnus in general, because there's more than just two, and you can see how influential and powerful this one shard is. The other one's also very powerful, and they represent a small fraction of Magnus' total power. And yet they do things that are like the equivalent or even more impressive than some of the Primarchs. Yeah, like, share, subscribe. I will see you next.